Good morning. Welcome to the Eastman Financial Report. I'm Dan Eastman, your host, and today is Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your viewership here at the Eastman Financial Report, where we broadcast live Monday through Friday from 11:30 to 12 a.m. Central Time from the great metropolis of the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And of course, we broadcast on the mighty Cobalt microphone, and that's what you're seeing right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. We always appreciate your viewership, and we appreciate your viewership throughout the day at all of the fine programming you see on worldviewtube.com, and of course, here at Worldview Radio. As you know, we are a Christian broadcasting network, and it's our ministry, our mission, our passion, our goal, our desire to be able to bring into that great marketplace of ideas, that ever expanding marketplace of digital communication, news and information from the day from a Christian perspective. And that's what we do here, and that's our ministry. And if you'd like to help us continue in that Christian ministry, you can do so by going to worldviewfoundation.com and making a donation. If you are interested in making a one-time donation, that's very helpful. If you'd like to sign up for repeat donations, that has the added economic benefit of flattening our revenue curve a bit so we can better match our costs to revenues and keep our content free of charge. As you know, you're not paying a paywall or a subscription fee to see this program or any of the programming we broadcast throughout the day. And we do that as part of our ministry, just like the apostles 2,000 years ago, as they went about the Middle East preaching the good news of the gospel. They didn't charge a fee. That wasn't entertainment. There was no admission fee involved. It was a gift freely given. And that's what we continue to do today, here 2,000 years later. And we will continue to do this until the second coming, because this is, in fact, our ministry. And you can help us in this effort. At the bottom of the screen, you see wvwfoundation.com or worldviewfoundation.com, or you can go to use the QR code, and it'll take your smartphone right to that website, and you can make a donation and help us keep this ministry alive and fresh. It's our goal to be able to broadcast powerfully, robustly throughout 2026, because this is a very, very complicated year. A lot of budget issues, financial issues. Of course, we have the midterm elections, and all of that will generate massive amounts of information. And it's very important for us to keep that from a Christian perspective in the great marketplace of ideas, which is ever expanding thanks to digital technology. We have finally democratized information in this country and in this globe. And we have a lot of competitors out there for the ear and the eye. It's not like the good old days where you had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and they told you that's the way it is. Well, we don't do that. We tell you our perspective along with millions of other voices, and you get to have your perspective. And that's the way it should be. And we're very happy to be a part of this digital communication phenomenon brought to us by, of course, the internet and the digital world in which we live. You can also help us by doing business with the vendors you see advertising throughout the day on our network. We don't sell blocks of advertising time. Rather, we partner with companies that we know and trust. So when you do business with them, a small portion of the proceeds comes back to the network in the form of a commission. And that also helps us keep our bottom line positive, and that allows us to continue broadcasting our materials for free. There's a third way you can help, not only the network, but yourself and friends and relatives, and that's by going to worldviewtube.com/vault. It's a new product we have. It's called The Vault. If you go to worldviewtube.com/vault, you can subscribe. Now, there's a little paywall there, but a subscription to the Vault is a very important thing, because Brandon House has been doing this ministry since 2006, and he's written 15 books. And those are all digitized now. The events, the conferences, the seminars, all of that's been recorded, and all of that material is now living inside of the Vault, where we put treasures, right? That's what we lock up in vaults. Well, if you are working on your spiritual development, or you're running into a rough spot, or you'd like to have access to a community of Christian believers, a subscription to the Vault is a very valuable thing, because we all hit bumps in the road from time to time as we go through our lives. And if you're feeling like you need some spiritual uplifting from a community of Christians, in addition to Scripture, of course, so a subscription to the Vault is a valuable thing to have in your briefcase or toolbox, because it gives you 24/7 access on demand to amazing Christian content. It's very uplifting. It's very spiritually stimulating, and it's a wonderful thing to have when you're feeling like you we need to tune up the engine. It's also important if you have friends or relatives who are struggling in life, and we all do. We have some people we love dearly that are wrestling with spiritual issues, maybe family issues, maybe financial issues. And what do you do for them? What do you give them to help them along? Well, one thing you can do is give them a gift subscription to the vault because, at 2 o'clock in the morning, if they're up staring at the ceiling, what a wonderful thing to be able to log in. Here it is. It's worldviewtube.com/vault to log in and find community amongst Christian believers. So that's a wonderful gift to give, not only to yourself, but also to people that you know and love who are struggling. So think about that. That's how you support our ministry. You can make a donation. That's wonderful. You can do business with the vendors you see advertising throughout the day on our network. And you can subscribe to worldviewtube.com/vault and have in your hands a very valuable tool for an entire year of wonderful, amazing content. There's also the reruns of the Eastman Financial Reporter in the vault. So if you'd like to review my work or listen to what I said or think about challenging my thoughts and opinions, that's great. Subscribe to the vault, pay the fee, have at it, and please come on the show. I'd love to debate. It's always an open door here. If you think that you have a better view of the economic model, the dismal science than I do, we're happy to have that discussion, friendly discussion, online, and certainly broadcasting it to the masses. So anyway, that's how you can help out. Well, I want to talk about the news today, of course. That's what we do here. My version of I shouldn't say this, but my version of Walter Cronkite, only here we are in the digital age. And this is not the way it is. This is one of the perspectives that we look at. And that's the beautiful thing about the new modern era of digital communication. We're not here to tell you what to think. We're here to offer opinions, thoughts, information, facts, and let you make up your own mind. And that's sort of how the Eastman Financial Report got started as a concept. I'll be broadcasting 3 years coming in March. I'm kind of excited about that. My 3-year anniversary here on the air. But the idea was taking skills developed in the classroom, the college classroom, back in my professorial days when I was professing for a living, and taking critical thinking skills and bringing it into this great marketplace of ideas so that when people see financial and economic headlines, you don't just see the silver minnow swimming by and grab for it. Rather, you step back and think, wait a minute, who's saying that? Why are they saying that? What does it mean? And how do I interpret it so that I can make better personal economic decisions? That's the whole purpose of this, is to be better economic thinkers. And when, I spend a lot of time on X and in some very wonderful communities of not only financial experts, but also economic experts and social experts and just plain old experts. And it's a wonderful discussion. And it's very eye-opening that there's information to suggest that we have a long way to go for financial literacy. That was a big deal back in the day when I was a securities commissioner. One of the ideas was we can show up as the cops after the crime has been committed and catch the bad guy and put the bad guy in jail. The money's long gone. And that was a big problem in financial regulation, especially securities regulation. By the time the regulators get in, catch the bad guy, prosecute the bad guy, lock up the bad guy, the money is long, long gone, and nobody gets their money back. So the idea was, well, what if we started financial literacy so that we would warn people ahead of time to not be caught up and involved in scams? And there's all sorts of financial scams. I spent many, many years of my career analyzing financial scams and financial fraud and fraud in general. And the idea was that we would perhaps be able to head the bad guys off at the pass, and by educating people to not just hear and see a headline, you would rather think more deeply about how money works. And that's important. How do interest rates work? And how do people make a return on their investment? Is it an interest borrowed, lended as an investment debt, or is it equity? Do you take the ride and hope that the company or the enterprise prospers? Understanding that at a deeper level is important. And that's why we talk about all of the macroeconomic issues of the day, because it all impacts the individual. And that's why now today I want to talk about the jobs numbers and data, because it's very confusing today. First I woke up and I'm reading all this news. It's good news, it's bad news, it's bad news, it's good news. And I'm thinking, okay, wait, this is when the silver minnow is swimming. Let us dig deeper and see what's going on. Well, of course, we've been waiting for the jobs data that is compiled by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the federal government. And as part of the $2.5 trillion annual deficit, we fund a bureau whose job it is to try to figure out how many jobs there are in the United States at any given point of time. Now, that might sound simple, but it's not simple. It could be simple if we used advanced like fractal analytic technologies that could track every last job, because every job, at least above market, not black market, but above the market jobs, there will be withholding taxes, and there will be contributions to Social Security, and there will be all of the attributes that make your take-home paycheck a lot smaller than your gross pay. And it should be relatively easy to add that all up because everybody is reporting that to the federal government. You see, the IRS has a pretty good handle on a weekly or biweekly basis who's getting paid what, who worked how many hours. And in a digital world, that should be a relatively simple thing for big data to handle, like Doge or Fractal or these technologies that can take massive amounts of data and process it very quickly and come up with an answer. But we don't have that. That's not what's happening at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So what they do, they use all sorts of old-fashioned metrics to try and figure out how many jobs are there in the United States, and how many people are working in jobs. I mean, how many people are actually working on a daily basis? And of course, people come, they go. It's your first day of work, your last day of work. You've been laid off. You're taking a vacation. But the point is, the idea with this Bureau of Labor Statistics is to come up with a number that policymakers and congressional representatives and senators and even the president can use to make good public policy. And that's why it's important to kind of know how many jobs there are in the economy. Now, if we assume there's 330 million Americans, then that's kind of a hard number to calculate as well, because according to our United States Constitution, we have to do a census every 10 years, which is kind of an amazing thing. We've been doing an American census since the beginning of the Constitution in 1789. The idea was for apportionment. They want to know how many people live in each state so you can figure out how many congressional representatives they get and send the representatives to the House of Representatives so each state the people in each state are proportionately represented in Congress. So if you do the math, and it's roughly 167,000 people per congressional district, sort of, kind of, and of course this is in day one of that next 10-year period. And of course we don't get a census done on January 2nd, and then you're good for 10 years. It takes 2 years to compile the numbers. So the point is, the whole purpose of the census was to figure out apportionment so that we have relatively equal representation. Each cluster of 167,000 of us have our own congressional representative. We certainly have ours. You have yours, and that's how the system works. So when you think about calculating the number of jobs in the economy, it's for that congressional body and the president to think about, are people gainfully employed? Are the people happy? They're working, they're making money. And that's why that number is important. So they put it out, but it's always been rather troubling. If you remember back in the Biden administration, there was an adjustment made in the fourth year of the Biden administration, and 1 million jobs disappeared. There were 1 million fewer jobs that everybody, including the Bureau of Labor Statistics, thought were real. They missed it by 1 million. But when you think about 330 million people, and you think about 158.5 million jobs, that's the new number, and it's down 1 million because they adjusted the number for 2025 down. Now, keep in mind, 2025 was the first year of President Trump's second term. And of course, there was an adjustment of 1 million jobs down on the last of the Biden administration. And now another 1 million jobs seem to have gone missing, but they haven't gone missing. The people who have been working have been working. The people who are looking for work are looking for work. What's missing is accuracy in the Bureau of Labor Statistics and their ability to count the number of jobs that are currently in the United States economy. So the question becomes, why do we even need this? What value does this have to anyone if they're off by 1 million jobs? It just really is not an accurate number. So it becomes more of a benchmark number. And I suppose you could track the number on a line. You could create a curve But then when there's adjustments, then obviously the curve will drop because there's a million fewer jobs. So the headline, of course, during the Biden administration was, "Look, Biden, it was he lied to everybody. There was a million fewer jobs than he told everyone." And well, that same echo is now echoing again this morning, saying, "Oh, look, there are a million fewer jobs once President Trump was sworn in," and that's to be expected. That's the political nonsense of using government data to hurt your political opponent. But if you're a financial person or an economic person, you will look past all of the political noise and ask yourself the question: is the American economy growing? Are there more jobs in the American economy, or is the American economy contracting? Are there fewer jobs? And what this would suggest is, when you look at a million jobs in the last year of the Biden administration, a million jobs in the first year of President Trump's second administration, what it suggests is that these numbers are not very accurate. So there's not a lot of economic or financial value to these numbers, but there's a lot of political value, and that's what you're seeing. So as you see these numbers, what you really don't want to be doing is reacting from a naive perspective. You say, wait a minute, I want to understand this. Because when you look at the number of jobs that were added in 2025, there was 181,000 jobs added, yet the total number of jobs that were allegedly in existence dropped by a million. So, okay, so what does that mean? So what exactly does it mean? And it can mean whatever you want as far as political spin goes. But from an economic perspective, these numbers are predictive only for establishing policy positions primarily in Congress. That's why the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts them out. It's because Congress needs to know, are we growing the economy or are we shrinking? And what Congress should be seeing is they don't know. They don't know what's going on. They cut a million here, they cut a million there. And maybe that's something that needs fixing rather than just perpetuating. Now, when you juxtapose that, which is from the retail perspective, that's bad news. Okay, a million fewer jobs than we thought we had. Even though there's not a million unemployed people, okay, that's a negative. But then when you juxtapose that to the JOLTS report that was also released today, and JOLTS stands for Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, JOLTS, okay? What that number came out in January of 2026 was that there was 130,000 new jobs created in January, which really offsets the negative media story of the jobs data adjustment, because if you're looking at real-time jobs existing, 130,000 jobs in January is a significant number, and that's why that would be considered positive. It's a big win for the Trump administration. And when you look at how jobs are added up and calculated, and as I pointed out, everybody who has a real job, where you fill out the paperwork, the I-9, the W-4, all that, you file it, the federal government knows that you are earning money and that money is being collected from your paycheck and is sent by your employer into the IRS, because that's the withholding mechanism. And it should be very easy to see if that number goes up by by 130,000. You should be able to see that in the data as it's happening. Now, some people are losing their jobs and some people are adding a new job, but what you're doing is you're measuring the delta, and the delta is 130,000 new jobs created in January, which is a great number, and it suggests a robust economy. So that's the spin from, of course, that's the spin from the administration side. He said, well, we had a great January, and the other side will say, yeah, but you had a terrible 2025. And then, the administration can counter by saying, yes, but you had a terrible 2024. The point is, when we look at job numbers, it's a very, very difficult thing to measure, because we've got 330 million Americans. You've got 158 and a half or 159 and a half million, pick a number, jobs in place. And when you're measuring a delta of such a large base, the fact is that 130,000 jobs out of 158 million jobs is not that big of a needle mover. And you'd not expect that in a stable population where everybody who wants a job has a job, except unemployment came out at 4.3% this morning as well, which is actually down from 4.4 last month. What it tells us is we don't have a surging unemployment problem, so we see stability within the job base. So let's say it's 158.5 million jobs nationwide. We added 130,000 jobs, which is great, and that'll show up in the next Bureau of Labor calculation. So what it tells us is the economy is in pretty good shape. It's not booming. It's certainly not collapsing. We're not looking at a recession. We're not looking at a contraction of GDP. As a matter of fact, our gross domestic product number has been rather robust. So overall, when you look at these job numbers, there's not much to see from a statistical perspective, and certainly not to be caught up in the political headwinds, because the economy is moving. It's moving along. It's doing what it's supposed to do. The bigger problem the economy has, of course, is the debt overhang, the 38.5 trillion and the $2 trillion deficit we're running. And I'll talk about that next. I have to take a break here. I'll be right back. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Okay, so the final thought on labor, and we're talking, this is the labor market show, I guess, today, but we also look at the labor force participation rate. And we take a look at the population of the United States and say, how many of the people in the United States are actually gainfully employed in a legitimate job, a withholding, there'll be a four-type job. And that number is actually up. It's up to 62.5% of the people in America who want to work are working. And of course, we have infants and children who can't work, and the elderly and the disabled. But there's 62.5% of Americans that are working as of this data point. And that's significant because it's up 0.4% from last month. And year over year, we're seeing a 3.7% increase in the people working in the economy. So again, that tells us that the economy is growing, that the base of employed Americans is growing. It's not setting records. It's not, off the charts, but it's consistent with 130,000 new jobs created in January, and the number of people working has increased. So what it tells us is that the American economy is catching a bit of fair wind, and the sailing will be a little smoother for the next couple of months. And that's a very good thing. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about today, and this cracks me up, it's the Congressional Budget Office is a very well-respected agency of the federal Congress, and created by the Congress, and the Budget Office is within the executive. And effectively, what the Congressional Budget Office is saying today is that the U.S. fiscal path is unsustainable. Now, and the reason is they're seeing about $1.4 trillion in additional deficit over the next 10 years. That's in addition to the $38.5 trillion in debt that we've accumulated. We're running annual deficits of $2 to $2.5 trillion a year. And they're looking at over the next 10 years, the projections are up $1.4 trillion. Now, keep in mind, when we kicked the can down the road back in, I think it was October or Yes, it was October of last year. It was one of the many can kickings down the road. They increased the debt ceiling of the United States to $41 trillion. And that's when the Treasury has to stop. There's a law that says the Treasury can only issue $41 trillion in debt and no more. And if the Treasurer of the United States were to go out and sell another bond, they'd be in violation of the law. So you don't. I mean, you hit the debt ceiling and you stop. They start using the money in the Treasury, and they borrow from the federal employees pension fund, and they do all sorts of budgetary tricks to not run out of money once you hit the debt ceiling. And of course, you race over to Congress and you say you must raise the debt ceiling, or the whole thing will come unhinged and we'll go into default. And of course, Congress will argue about food stamps, and they'll argue about Obamacare premiums, and they'll argue about ICE, and then they'll argue about the next thing, and the next thing after that, and then they'll pass it, and then there'll be a higher debt ceiling, and then the Treasury can continue issuing debt. Well, that's what the Congressional Budget Office is warning about. And the thing that caught my eye is that they're saying that the U.S. fiscal path is unsustainable. They use the word unsustainable. Now, if you go and subscribe to the Vault and you pay the fee and you watch the Eastman Financial Report reruns, you will know that I've been talking about for 3 years other famous people who have said the same thing. Warren Buffett comes to mind, and the CEO of Chase Bank comes to mind, and of course Jerome Powell, the current chair of the Federal Reserve, comes to mind, and there were all sorts of other people. I think even Janet Yellen, the former chair of the Federal Reserve and / Treasurer of the United States, all of the people who know and understand money are saying the same thing, that the current path, the current fiscal path of the United States government is unsustainable. And we are now hearing that from the Congressional Budget Office, in addition to the Federal Reserve itself, in addition to leaders in finance and economics. Everyone is saying that you cannot continue to spend $2 trillion plus a year you can't squeeze out of the tax base and finance the rest by selling bonds and grow the national debt to $41 trillion is the next ceiling, and then beyond that, without substantial consequence to the American economy. And this is what I talk about every day on this show, is the fact that we don't have a mechanism to guide Congress or keep it within the guide rails. So we end up with annual deficits as far as the eye can see. There is no one in Washington that is publicly saying we need a balanced budget anymore. I mean, I think during the Reagan administration, I remember David Stockman had some thoughts about that. The idea is today nobody even thinks about a balanced budget. We have proven that you can stack debt to the ceiling, to the moon, and nothing happens. So we continue to do it because you can't cut federal programs easily in Congress, and because you've deficit spent and you're spending money that you've borrowed on programs and the wheels haven't fall off and the lights haven't gone out, nothing has happened, then there's no crisis to change the paradigm. So that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And unfortunately, that puts our Federal Reserve System at great stress because they have to keep buying more and more bonds to keep the bond markets in equilibrium at an interest rate that they feel is proper monetary policy. And that's why if you look at their balance sheet, go to the Federal Reserve's website, they'll show you it's the quantitative easing, this ability to buy debt, and they keep buying and buying, and between $6 and $8 trillion could be much higher in the future, and it will be much higher in the future if you're going to keep interest rates in a reasonable band. So effectively, when the Congressional Budget Office is saying the same thing as the Federal Reserve Chair, as the head of the largest bank in America, as the head of one of the richest guys, hedge funds, and all these people are saying the same thing. It's unsustainable. It's a warning to be heard, but the question is, if a tree falls in the middle of the forest and nobody's there, does anybody hear it? And I think the answer is no, nobody hears it because there is no movement in Congress. They're so busy fighting over spending and using political issues like Obamacare premiums and ICE and food stamps was a big one back just before Thanksgiving, that they don't care. They just don't care. And there'll be consequences. And that's why we're hearing more and more smart people warning. Anyway, I'm out of time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please go to worldviewfoundation.com and help us make a donation. And I will talk to you tomorrow afternoon. Thank you.